So today I want to talk about something that happened 48 hours ago that should have every strategic analyst in the world paying very close attention. Iran just granted Russia safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz. Russian naval vessels, Russian cargo ships, Russian oil tankers, all of them can now transit the strait freely while everyone else is blocked. And this is not the first time something like this has happened. China has seen this exact pattern before. And what came next historically was the formation of a new global order that lasted for generations. Let me explain what just happened, why it matters so profoundly, and what this tells us about what is coming next. Because this is not just about ships passing through a strait. This is about the formalization of a new axis of power that is explicitly designed to replace American global dominance. And the historical precedent for this moment is crystal clear if you know where to look. So let me start with the facts. 2 days ago, Iranian Revolutionary Guard naval forces escorted 3 Russian ships through the Strait of Hormuz, 2 cargo vessels, and 1 military resupply ship. Iranian fast attack boats provided security, Iranian coastal radar guided them through safe channels, and Iranian officials publicly announced that Russia has been granted indefinite safe passage privileges through the strait as part of the comprehensive strategic partnership between Iran and Russia. Now, on the surface, people might think this is just normal cooperation between allies. Russia and Iran are partners. Of course, they help each other. But what most people are missing is the broader implication. Iran is not just letting Russian ships through. Iran is demonstrating that it can selectively enforce the closure of Hormuz. Iran can allow some nations to pass while blocking others. Iran has turned Hormuz into a political tool, not just a military choke point. And this changes everything. Think about what this actually means in practice. Japan wants to import oil from Saudi Arabia. Blocked. South Korea wants to import LNG from Qatar. Blocked. India wants to import crude from the UAE. Blocked. But Russia wants to move naval assets or commercial cargo through the Gulf. Allowed. Iran has created a 2-tier system. Nations aligned with Iran, Russia, and China get access. Nations aligned with America do not. This is not a military blockade in the traditional sense. This is selective access control based on geopolitical alignment. And this is exactly how great powers throughout history have used control of strategic choke points to build spheres of influence and create new global orders. Now let me explain why I said China has seen this before. Because China absolutely has. And Chinese strategic planners are watching this moment very carefully because they recognize the historical pattern. Let me take you back to the year 1453. Constantinople falls to the Ottoman Empire. And what does the Ottoman Empire do immediately after conquering Constantinople? It closes the Bosphorus Strait to European shipping. European merchants who want access to Asian trade routes through the Black Sea suddenly find themselves blocked. But Ottoman allies, Islamic kingdoms, certain Italian city-states that pay tribute, they get passage. This selective control of a strategic choke point forced Europe to find alternative routes to Asia, which led directly to the Age of Exploration. Portugal sailing around Africa. Spain funding Columbus to find a western route. The entire reshaping of global trade that followed, the colonization of the Americas, the rise of European global empires, all of it traces back to the Ottomans closing the Bosphorus and forcing Europe to adapt. China remembers this. Chinese historians study this. And Chinese strategists see the exact same dynamic playing out right now with Iran and Hormuz. Iran closes the strait to American-aligned nations, grants passage to Russia and potentially to China. Forces everyone else to find alternatives. And in the process of finding those alternatives, the entire global economic system gets restructured around new trade routes, new partnerships, new power centers. But there is an even more direct historical parallel. And this one is closer to our era. In 1956, Egypt nationalizes the Suez Canal. Britain, France, and Israel invade Egypt to retake the canal. And what happens? The United States and the Soviet Union both pressure the European powers to withdraw. They do. And Egypt retains control of Suez. But here is the crucial detail. Egypt does not keep Suez open to everyone equally. Egypt charges differential rates. Egypt grants preferential access to Soviet ships during the Cold War. Egypt uses control of Suez as a political tool to extract concessions from both superpowers. And what was the long-term result? The Suez Crisis marked the end of British and French global dominance. It marked the moment when America and the Soviet Union became the undisputed superpowers. It marked the transition from a European-centered world order to a bipolar Cold War order. The control of one strategic choke point accelerated a global power transition that was already underway. This is what China is seeing right now. China looks at Iran granting Russia safe passage through Hormuz and sees the exact same pattern. A declining hegemon, America, losing control of a critical choke point. A rising power, Iran, using that choke point to selectively benefit its allies. And a global power transition accelerating as nations are forced to adapt to new realities. So what does this mean practically? What comes next? Let me walk you through what I expect to unfold over the next 6 to 12 months based on this historical pattern. First, Russia will use its Hormuz access to significantly increase its naval presence in the Indian Ocean. Russian ships can now transit freely between the Mediterranean, through Suez if Egypt allows, or around Africa, and then through Hormuz into the Arabian Sea and Indian Ocean. This allows Russia to project power in a region where it has historically had very limited presence. Second, China will almost certainly receive similar safe passage guarantees from Iran. China has not announced this publicly yet, but the strategic logic is overwhelming. China needs Gulf energy. Iran needs Chinese economic support. The deal is already in place. It is just a matter of when it gets formalized publicly, and once China has guaranteed passage while Japan, South Korea, and India do not, the entire Asian power dynamic shifts. China becomes the gatekeeper to Gulf energy for its neighbors. China can grant or deny access based on those nations' alignment with Chinese strategic interests. Third, and this is crucial, alternative trade routes will become economically viable that were previously too expensive. Overland pipelines from the Gulf, through Iran to Central Asia and then to China. Rail links along the Belt and Road Initiative that bypass maritime choke points entirely. Arctic shipping routes that Russia controls as Arctic ice melts. All of these alternatives were always possible, but they were more expensive than maritime shipping through Hormuz. Now that Hormuz is selectively closed, these alternatives become competitive. And once infrastructure gets built along these alternative routes, it does not get abandoned even if Hormuz reopens. The global trade network will have permanently diversified away from American-controlled maritime routes. Fourth, nations currently blocked from Hormuz will face a choice. Continue aligning with America and accept economic strangulation, or realign toward the Russia-Iran-China axis and regain energy access. This is the exact same choice nations faced during the Cold War. Align with the US or align with the Soviet Union? We are watching the emergence of a new bipolar world. Not US versus Soviet Union, US versus a China-Russia-Iran bloc. Fifth, and this is where it gets really interesting, Iran will start charging for access. Not immediately, but eventually. Iran will create a formal framework where nations that want passage through Hormuz can apply for permits, and those permits will come with conditions. Political conditions, economic conditions, security conditions. Iran will extract massive rents from its control of the strait, not through military force, through selective access control. This is exactly what the Ottomans did with the Bosphorus. This is exactly what Egypt did with Suez during the Cold War. And this is exactly what Iran is about to do with Hormuz. And the revenue Iran generates from this will dwarf whatever Iran was earning from oil exports before the war. Iran will become wealthy not from selling oil, but from controlling access to other nations' oil. Now let me talk about why America cannot stop this. Because the obvious question is, why does America not just force the strait open? Why does America not escort ships through Hormuz by force? And the answer is the same answer I've been giving for weeks. The cost is unacceptable. Iran has anti-ship missiles. Iran has mines. Iran has drones. Iran has fast attack boats. America could potentially clear a path through Hormuz. But it would require sustained military operations, constant minesweeping, air patrols 24/7, and accepting regular losses to Iranian attacks. The US Navy could do it. But the cost in lives, in money, and in political capital would be astronomical. And even if America did it, even if America forced the strait open by military means, Iran would just close it again the moment American forces reduced their presence. So America would have to maintain a permanent, massive military presence in the Gulf indefinitely. The annual cost would be hundreds of billions of dollars, and the American public has no appetite for this. None. So America is trapped. America cannot force Hormuz open sustainably. And as long as Hormuz remains selectively closed, Iran controls which nations get energy access and which do not. This is leverage that compounds over time. The longer this situation continues, the more nations realign. The more infrastructure gets built along alternative routes. The more the global system adapts to Iranian control rather than American control. Subscribe for more analysis on how control of strategic choke points is reshaping the global order and what it means for your future explained clearly. And tell me in the comments, do you think we are witnessing the formation of a new Cold War between the US and a China-Russia-Iran bloc? I will see you next time. Let me leave you with one final historical observation. Every major shift in global power has been accompanied by a shift in control of strategic trade routes. When Rome fell, control of the Mediterranean shifted. When the Ottomans rose, control of the Bosphorus shifted. When European empires rose, control of maritime routes around Africa and through the Atlantic shifted. When America rose, control of the Panama Canal and global sea lanes shifted. We are now watching control of the most critical energy choke point in the world shift from American dominance to selective Iranian control backed by China and Russia. This is not a minor event. This is a hinge point in history. And 50 years from now, historians will point to this moment as the beginning of the end of American unipolarity.